You're watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Sunday afternoon, 3 p.m., January 7th, 2024. Let's just check in with the chat here. Everything seems to be working. YouTube says 14 concurrent viewers, 8 likes. I have to figure out some way to put it on the screen. Although, you see these... Occasionally, I'll watch... a YouTube, there are a whole bunch of people on YouTube whose whole YouTube channel is about being YouTubers, how to use OBS plugins, how to make your stream look good. And they're always like, I've got this new effect plugin you have to see, you're going to love it, it's great for your stream. And it's some crazy busy thing that makes like puts the glasses on them, or what, it's just, you would never ever want to actually use any of these things. So I keep thinking, like, you know, it'd be nice to have some gadgets so that when we went to break, it showed the number of subscribers, viewers, whatever. But what's the point? All right, so nothing interesting in the chat. Today we're continuing our playthrough of the stolen relic, a Dear Holmes case. We're on our third letter now, and if you'll remember, the switchover in Dear Holmes, the version 2 switchover that happened a couple cases ago, says that there shall only be 3 letters per case. So this will be the last letter we get from the protagonists in this case, and then a 4th letter will be by Holmes himself. I'm not sure why, actually, now that I think of it, why they don't, like, why do they not keep it open? Like, some cases have 2 letters, some cases have 5 letters. Why be so strict about it? Anyway, before we jump into today's letter, a little bit of bookkeeping. We've been playing The Hidden Listener, a 12-part, the most expensive deluxe. I keep saying it's so expensive. The only reason I keep saying that is because it's sort of noteworthy. It's a open question about whether it's worth your money, and it's also one of those games that most of us can't afford. I can't really afford it either, but for the sake of the channel, I thought we'd go for it. Anyway, we just finished box 8 of 12. It's gotten interesting, it's gotten emotional, and we're going to try to finish it this week, in the next few days, in fact. So we're going to play tonight. I was hoping I would have liked to play a whole marathon today. I would have liked to go through 3 boxes today in a long marathon. But I think it would be unfair to those people who have been trying to follow along with it live. It's not a big deal if you miss a live session here. You just watch it on YouTube. It's not like the old days. When you would watch TV, if you missed it, you missed it. So anyway, but we're going to play the next box tonight at 11, and then I've scheduled Monday stream at 11, and my intention is to then stream Tuesday and Wednesday, and then finish the game on Wednesday. So that's that. And then after that, maybe we'll take a half a week off and then get back to playing some one-off games. I've got a whole bunch of new stuff that's stacking up, and we'll take a break from these long contiguous multi-part games, and I do have to record some reviews at some point. Okay, so getting back to our case, I did go back and read through the last letter, and I made a couple of notes. Our working theory, the predominant theory that many of us have here, and I am on Team Bird, is that a bird was used to steal this reliquary from the chapel, and that the maids are in on it. And I noticed a couple of things going back that seem to confirm that, though if there are people with alternate theories, I'd like to hear it. The one thing, I'll go over the new things I discovered that seem to give more credence to the idea that there's a bird, that it's a bird and a maid. But I do want to point out this thing. When I was reading this again, the second letter we got yesterday from the inspector, Andrew Mercer, my spider senses started to tingle a little bit, that he doesn't like the man of the house, and he knew Mrs. Bellamy since his childhood. A kinder, gentler woman has never lived. And I was like, wait a second, is this detective like being called in to solve the case, but he's in on it? And some people in the chat were thinking that Miss Bellamy is involved. But I'm going to tell you, this is Anna thought Bellamy. Anna thought both Mr. and Mrs. Ward Bellamy and the woman were involved at some point. And I gave the reason why I thought that was implausible. And I think we need to come up with a name for this phenomena. And what it is that if Mrs. Bellamy or Mr. Bellamy were involved, and then they've somehow taken the extra steps to contact Sherlock Holmes and get him involved, that's insanity. Only the mastermind, evil genius level Moriarty deliberately calls Sherlock Holmes and thinks they can play on the same field as him and outwit him. So we need a name for that general phenomena. Like a person would never get the top detective to investigate their case. It basically clears you. It basically says you definitely didn't do it. And it's sort of like the people who voluntarily take the lie detector, but this is even worse. So I don't know this is a little contest. Who can come up with the best term for the phenomena of being cleared in a case because you've brought in the top detective? I'm not sure what you would call it. Holmesian exculpatory evidence. Okay, anyway, someone will come up with a good term for it. A term for the fact that that we know you're not involved because you brought in Sherlock Holmes or someone of his caliber. Mark just says that's called being smug. All right, so let me talk about the couple things I noticed when I went back through letter 2 and maybe letter 1 that I think confirms our theory. So the inspector has come, he's interviewed the two footmen. We know one fell asleep, one's drunk. Then Jenkins tells us the night before it was taken, everyone retired because of it was raining. I was awake until late. He hears a plop, plop, plop. He sees Flora, one of the maids, drenched but oddly happy, clutching a croquet ball in one hand and a small rag in the other, trying to dry the path behind her as she crept to her chamber. So sort of trying to clean up the water is how I read it. I mean, it's odd that she's happy. We think she was just out there involved in it. But I do think, like she says, he must be remembering another day. She says, I definitely wasn't out there yesterday. I'm remembering another day. But look how he remembers it's raining. He remembers that he remembers the time. And he remembers, I believe he remembers it. Yeah, look what he says here. It's strange, don't you think? My brace is going missing just as Flora starts to act strangely. So he's remembered this is distinctly last night. He hasn't confused it with another day. He's like, it's happened in the same day that my braces went missing. We think she's using her braces we were thinking originally maybe she was lowering something down or taking it, but now I think the slingshot idea is very sound. It's 20 feet up. She might have a hard time throwing that croquet ball, but if she's practiced with the slingshot, she could do it. And maybe use the braces and maybe even use this little rag as the sort of pouch that the croquet ball goes in. Okay. Another mention of the candelabra. Now, here was something I don't know if it's significant, but did jump out at me. He goes and he talks to the maids. He finds out they're actually weren't together the whole time as they thought, because they got so much dust and dirt that they did have to separate. He catches them admitting they separated. And then she does mention leaves. Leaves get mentioned twice. Now, this is the thing I have no idea what the significance is. But when the relic went missing, they were sweeping up and they found a few leaves. And then one goes to fix her hair and the other one swept up the leaves. I swept up the leaves while she was away. Now, here's another thing I noticed. Look at this. Okay, look at this part. I heard a long whistle outside, was reminded of the Bellamy's hound. He says, the Mastiff outside, I presume him to be a good watchdog. Did he bark that night or alert you or anything in the days before the artifact vanished? And look what Jane says. No, and then shot a glance at Flora. Everything's been quiet here for a week. No visitors. What is going on here? What is this? No, and then shot a glance at Flora? This is very suspicious. What is happening here? Any theories about this? I wonder if they're hiding the fact that, like, he's not a good watchdog, like he's deaf or something. But they don't want to say anything about it. But this really seems odd to me. This is a very odd sentence here. It makes me think that they were like, should we say anything about the fact that the dog is deaf? No, don't say anything. So there was that. Then here's the other little part. Now we noticed this thing. This is in the category of sort of gilding the lily, where the page boy finds a feather. Now, he comes out, he's looking for clues, he's trying to get a reward. I found nothing but a feather, which I put in my cap. Okay, now two things that I think I did not appreciate when we first read it. The first thing is, I read it somehow as him coming out of like a storage shed. But no, he's come right out of the chapel with the feather. So the feather from a bird is right in the chapel. That feels like it kind of seals it to me that we're dealing with the bird that stole it. I don't know how I missed that before, but the feather is actually in the chapel. Okay, and then another thing here. We noticed this at the time. Someone said magpies are signs of spirits nearby, but look who's telling him that. The page boy says, you know, they say magpies are signs that spirits are nearby. Jane told me so. So the maids are like doing this the maids are at the core of all of this. It's the maids with the birds, and it seems to be like both maids seem to be involved to me. I mean, this is a very important question. If we're going to pin the blame on the maids, we better be sure that it's two of them or just one of them. Flora was the one with the croquet ball, and Jane is the one who's super nervous. I believe it was Jane who was super nervous, and Jane is the one that shot a glance at Flora. Although she could be shooting a glance at Flora like, should you tell him where you were? And then on our first letter, Jane was the one who was nervous, looking nervously to Flora. So these girls both seem involved. And then he finds insurance for money. And then he's going to have us, in this letter, come back with the chemical analysis of his medicine, which I wouldn't be surprised if has got some sleeping powder in it for unrelated reason. And then don't forget, we heard the page boy say he heard scary cries in the night while he was running home, and we think that was the cry of the bird. Anna says, I was thinking the dog did bark, but Flora asked her not to say anything because she was sneaking around. That's possible. I suppose... Well, wait a second. There's something we haven't really thought about. Our theory is that the maid took the croquet ball, broke the window so the bird could come through. But that doesn't quite work, does it? Why doesn't that work? Because she's got the croquet ball in her hand coming home. And it's not in the chapel. Is this the braces? I was thinking she was using the... I was convinced to the argument that she was using the braces as a slingshot. But she would have had a rope around the croquet ball or somehow to get it back out. And then we've got a couple people in the channel, a couple negative people in the channel saying they're going to be mad if it's a bird. I am team bird. I don't think there's anything wrong with the bird, a trained bird. How to train a bird to do it? The window is as small as a dinner plate. What bird manages that? Have you seen the videos of how smart these birds are? There's a fortune teller in town. She probably has a trained bird. If you're a thief, you train birds to do... Birds can be trained. And the girls have created this purple cushion. Maybe the bird has been trained to know how to identify it via the cushion. Maybe the girls could have sewed in some scent to it to attract the bird. Birds are smart. You could train a bird to go retrieve a thing. Anna says a dinner plate is big for a bird. I agree with you. I completely agree. A dinner plate is plenty of room for a bird to sneak in through it. And it is jagged with glass, but I think a bird could get in there easily. You'd have to have time to train it, but if we assume a trained bird... But I'm still hung up on this croquet ball now. She would have had to put a string on it and reel it back. That's a little bit more problematic. She's not string, like a full rope. And there's no sign of it. How big is the relic? Could the bird even grab it? Yeah, it's a little tube. It's a couple-inch tube. It's just big enough to hold a finger. It's a reliquary. We learned the relic is the finger. The reliquary is a little tube container for the... You'd need access to the chapel and have a source of broken window to train it. Well, you'd need a similar building to train it, but no one's addressing the croquet ball problem. Unless that's completely a red herring, but I don't believe it is. Macon Weary is on Team Monkey. There's a different Sherlock Holmes case with the monkey. A bird can do it. A bird can fetch something and do it. You'd have to train him on it though. All right, so let us read our last letter here. I am concerned about this croquet ball thing. Okay, if we had to come up with a theory, it would be that the croquet ball was attached to a string. Or the suspenders. Let's not forget, hold on. Let's not forget there's a big tree near the chapel. They just don't think someone could physically go from the tree to the roof. It would be too precarious. But maybe you could just climb the tree and then with the suspender braces tied to a croquet ball, throw it and bring it back. So maybe you wouldn't need a slingshot if you're not doing it from the ground. You do it from the tree and the braces bring it back. All right, here we go. Oh, okay. It's Watson. I see some pictures of birds on the back of this. All right, here we go. This isn't the solution, right? No Holmes yet. Okay. It's just a letter from Watson, though. Interesting. 7 July. Our last letter was 6 of July. The Horse and Hare Inn, Tilford, Surrey. Dear Holmes. Oh, I guess what? Why is Watson? Why do we have the letter from Holmes? I guess he's given us a copy. Dear Holmes, I hope Amsterdam fares well. I'm writing to you from a delightfully snug inn in Tilford. It is the end of a tiresome day, and I have made the inquiries you requested. I had anticipated finding a resolution for Sir Bellamy by now, but as I look over my notes, the odd theft only continues to perplex me. My findings today suggest that Sir Bellamy is entangled in something greater than the case of the missing relic, that is. Yet I am utterly unable to perceive what that something might be. Please review my observations, which I shall provide below as soon as you have the opportunity. Yesterday, 6 July, I arrived in the village near 7 in the morning, and was met at the Horse and Hare by Inspector Mercer. He's a fine young man of perhaps 30 years, notably tall and broad-shouldered, with a bristling mustache and a look of authority on his face. Two of the inn's serving girls struggled to avert their gazes from him as he spoke to me. Once they saw I had noticed their staring, they giggled and rushed away with their bundles of linen. He seemed not to notice as he led me to a carriage outside, in which we proceeded to Oakvale Manor. As we rode, the inspector reviewed the facts of the Bellamy case. I asked if he had any theories. He said he believes the husband to be the villain in the affair. The old scoundrel blames her for it. He's determined to have his own wife arrested. I played the fool. Why? Mercer leaned forward in the landau, dropping his voice so the driver would not hear him. They have been married for 3 years and have no children. Sir Bellamy is the last of his line, almost 65 years of age, and he's obsessed that he still might have an heir. It's plain as a pikestaff. I nodded along and began to take note. He wants the grounds to marry again before it's too late. My guess is he conspired with one of the footmen, the one named Jarvis. You'll meet him. Shifty fellow, though I still don't see how they managed it. Your theory appears to lack a foundation of evidence, I cautioned, and Mercer spoke with passion. Mark my words, the relic will turn up of its own accord in due time, if he hasn't already disposed of it. Consider this. Bellamy could have staged a robbery and had the saint's finger hidden, then started casting doubt on Annie. With enough of a clamor, he can justify the divorce regardless of her guilt in the matter, and then claim an insurance settlement on the confounded thing. He'll make off with a new fortune. The reprobate must believe he's brilliant. In the last minutes of our ride, Mercer continued to express his certainty that it was without a doubt the footman who helped Sir Bellamy stage the relic's theft, and that, though they might intend to destroy the object, it must still be hidden somewhere on the property. The inspector planned to conduct a more thorough search of Oakvale upon our arrival. Having now done the same, I have much to consider. Oakvale is the sad wreckage of a once majestic home. It reflects the master, bent, crumbling, with windows either boarded or broken like jagged teeth in an aged mouth. At the door, we were greeted by Sir Bellamy's creased face, mottled with liver spots. His shabby black coat dragged along the floor behind him, and had several tears across one sleeve. Still, I wager it's worth more than any of my own garments. His cough, rather aggressive, was immediate evidence of a congestion in his lungs, but I had to do little guesswork, for once he learned I was a medical man, he readily agreed to an examination. Prognosis? Holmes, Sir Bellamy is desperately ill, and is convinced in every fiber of his being that he is cursed. Every attempt at questioning the man inevitably became discussion of the relic and the effects its absence would have on him and those around it. Thankfully, his rants about Efford's curse were quickly interrupted by the regal Lady Bellamy's arrival. She is slender, with a wreath of silver-gilt hair, and welcomed us in a low, measured voice as she emerged from a side chamber. She greeted the inspector first, her hand resting rather long within his grasp. One could have seen the affection between them even in the dark. Once she had taken a seat, I explained to Lady Bellamy that I was visiting on your behalf, and that I would be lending a hand to the inspector. Let them get to work then, Henry, was her smiling response. Thus they agreed to leave me to my own devices, and I quickly began the tasks you outlined for me. I went first to the chapel. The narrow chamber was dim, so before proceeding I stepped back outside to fetch a candle. The Bellamy's page boy, fortunately, was within sight, sharing his lunchbox with the birds and chuckling at their antics, so I sent him off in search of a light. He returned with a lantern, and as he handed it off, he pulled a small device from his pocket, a heavy rock, lodestone it seemed, bound to an old set of knitting needles. He demonstrated how he had been using the detecting device to search Oakvale for any metal objects that might have been used in the commission of the crime. Nothing so far, he said, almost to himself, as he began to wander the chapel with it. As I approached the tapestry on one side, he asked, "What about there, sir?" drawing my attention to it. "Someone could have hidden behind the tapestry. It's enormous." That was something I pointed out in the beginning. Yes, but how could they have departed without anybody taking notice?" came my rebuttal. The lad shrugged. "I heard Lady Bellamy fainted. Isn't that a typical ruse?" I was amused by his insight. "You really would like to earn that reward." His face brightened. "Well then, keep your eyes open and report anything you learn to Inspector Mercer or me. Agreed?" Page boy nodded and gave a snappy salute. "Aye, sir. Name's Teddy. I certainly will." And he was off with his device and a small pad of paper in hand. The boy is clever. Indeed, I thought what an excellent Baker Street irregular he would make. Nevertheless, as I examined the chapel and let the weight of its years soak in, I realized the room was too small to support his theory. Had a thief been concealing themselves behind the tapestry, waiting to flee with the relic, they would have failed to leave the cramped chamber unnoticed. I also tested the walls and floors, stomping around vigorously, but found no unseen passages. Neither is there a vault below the floor, nor are there attic chambers above the ceiling. Still, I did notice something peculiar while strolling about the chapel. High on the wall outside, in the moss below the broken window, were several pockmarks. When I examined them through a glass on a ladder, I noticed bits of yellow mixed into the stone's green. How significant that is, I cannot say, and of course, the search for footprints was futile because the residents had trampled about the grounds in their preceding investigations. Okay, does everyone see what's happened here? Let's see if the chat has figured out what's happened here. What has he noticed? High on the wall outside, in the moss below the broken window, were several pockmarks. When I examined them through a glass on a ladder, a telescope, binoculars. I noticed bits of yellow mixed into the stone's green. How significant that is, I cannot say. Okay, what are we looking at here? Come on, someone must have noticed it. Someone must have picked it up. Croquet ball smashing against the wall. That's exactly right. There's the window. Below it are pockmarks where the croquet ball has been thrown by someone at the window and missed. And it's hit the wall, bounced off, left a little bit of its paint. For those of you who don't know what croquet balls are, they're about the size of a softball, maybe like a large grapefruit. They're painted, colored, very colorful. And you use mallets and you hit them on the grass through little wickets. Kind of like you're playing mini golf with them, but hitting them with a mallet. So it's clear that what he's describing is the paint from a croquet ball hitting against the stone side of the building. Yes, absolutely. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Okay, continuing. From the chapel, I made my way to the servants' quarters so that I could speak with the remaining staff. I found the quarters empty, but was promptly redirected to the kitchen by Lady Bellamy. There I found the butler, Mr. Jenkins. That's interesting. Sorry, I should just keep reading. We'll come back to it. Maybe I'll just note when something sounds interesting. There I found the butler, Mr. Jenkins, and his wife, Lydia, the cook. She prepared a stew with a surprisingly upright posture and neatly pinned gray hair, while her husband, an exceedingly corpulent man verging on deafness, polished glasses. They worked loudly, and unlike most of the others, were disinterested in my presence. The elderly pair had little to say to me, though the butler complained of his missing braces. We've all got our own relics. I only had 2 pairs of braces, which makes them just about as valuable as any ancient artifact. Who's going to investigate my theft? At that point, his wife delivered a light but firm tap to the back of his head with a wooden spoon. "Old fool," she said, and offered her apologies for his sense of humor. I left them to their quarreling and traveled to the parlor after this, where I questioned the Bellamy's maids, Flora and Jane. They seemed eager to speak with me when I introduced myself. When asked about their recollections of the 3rd of July, they told me that they had found the chapel dirty and stale before preparing it for the relic's placement. They swept up plenty of dirt and dust, polished the newly installed candelabra, beat out the tapestry, and knocked down the cobwebs. After allowing them each to deliver their accounts of the day, I asked them about their evenings, and they agreed it had been an uneventful night. I posed another question, recalling the details provided by Inspector Mercer. What of the other days last week? Anything eventful? Jane answered excitedly. We celebrated Jarvis's birthday. We were out on the lawn playing games all day on the 1st. Thank heavens, Mrs. Jenkins reminded us to stow away the croquet mallets all before we left for the village. Isn't that right, Flora? Flora laughed sheepishly as the tall maid went on. Okay, that's a big clue. Tell me, you see if you can remember why that's so important. I wrote all this down and thanked the 2 for speaking with me. I then asked Jane to inform Sir Bellamy that I hoped to speak with him before departing. In that time, I questioned Flora about the ball which Mr. Jenkins, to Inspector Mercer, had reported seeing in her hands. Not 2 seconds passed before the girl burst into tears. I have it here. It was me who broke the window. I lied to the inspector, Flora cried, lifting the ball from a sewing basket on the parlor floor. It was wooden, heavy, and brightly painted with a yellow and white stripe. But it's nothing to do with the relic. I swear it. I'd never. Honest. The night before the saint's finger went missing, I met Jarvis in the small clearing behind the chapel. He had griped that it would be a dreadful boring night and that Eddie would be at their post anyway, so I agreed to keep his company for a short time that evening. She paused to wipe away her tears. I took him sweets, and I'm ashamed to admit some of the brandy that Mrs. Jenkins keeps in the kitchen. We spent some time talking as we indulged ourselves, and that was when we, or rather I, seemed to have broken the window. Jarvis is fond of sporting, see, and I fancy croquet, so he's been teaching me all about it, helping me develop a proper swing. We often practice in the woods nearby, so we started keeping one of the spare mallets and several balls in the clearing behind the chapel. Flora scratched the top of her head as she spoke. Well, that night, while we were chatting, he began to boast, as he always does, and the brandy, I believe, convinced me it would be humorous to try putting him to shame. So I said, "Watch, as this small maid hits the ball so far that you will never find it." And I swung the mallet, and off the ball went. We both began to laugh afterwards, and I forgot about it until we were leaving the clearing some 15 minutes later. She fell silently. "What then?" I asked, and after a short breath, she went on. "Well, having grown tired of the rain, I left Jarvis to enjoy the rest of his sweets and made my way to the servants' quarters. It was as I walked towards the chapel that I heard leaves rustling louder and louder. Fortunately, it was no spirit or specter, only young Teddy. However, he was holding the croquet ball in his hands and came bearing unfortunate news. My aimless swing had launched the ball at the chapel window and broken it. He told me he wouldn't say a word if I swore not to tell anyone that he'd been out late in the rain. I was considering confessing to Lady Bellamy until the saint's finger went missing and I saw Sir Bellamy so angry. Please understand, Dr. Watson, I didn't want anybody to think I had something to do with that. Are you going to tell the inspector?" Flora sighed, tears forming anew. I thanked her for her honesty and told her I would have to inform Sir Bellamy eventually, but that I still had several matters to investigate. A moment later, Jane finally returned to announce that Sir Bellamy is in his study. "He says if you wish to speak with him that you should do so now, before his bath." I replied in the affirmative and followed her into his study. There I said my farewell to the furious man, after explaining to him that I would need time to consult with you. He is impatient, which should not come as a surprise. "I'm growing old, doctor, and my finances have indeed suffered these years," he said to me, "but this is a great leap towards my demise, and those around me do not seem bothered in the least." So, well, let's continue reading, then we'll discuss. Chat has some comments about this already. Okay. "It's Anne's fault the object went missing in the first place, and this... what's happening here? Oh, he's... the husband is talking now. "It's Anne's fault that the object went missing in the first place, and the staff's only concerned with themselves." He stopped to cough before adding, "You know, one of them footmen has charged himself with convincing them they deserve more money from me. That battle has been the only thing on their minds for the past 2 weeks. The whole lot of them. Even the maids and the page boy, to whom I am providing a cottage on my property free of charge, came asking for an adjustment to their wages. And still they say I'm the mad one. And I say, no Jane, and no Flora, and no Eddie and Teddy." Thus ended my conversation with Sir Bellamy, and the inspection of Oakvale Manor and its grounds, though I uncovered another couple of details upon my exit from the manor, and after my subsequent return to the Horse and Hare. Leaving Oakvale, I noticed a torn sheet of paper being blown repeatedly by the wind against the foot of a garden statue. It appeared to be childish drawings from afar, but on closer inspection I realized there were some words written across the side. I will include a duplicate of the sheet of paper for you in this letter. Beyond that, I must report another alarming bit of information which I learned no more than 15 minutes ago from Inspector Mercer. He came to my room at the inn as I was writing the first pages of this missive and enjoying a plate of roast duck. "Confound that man," he said, pounding on my door. I opened it and demanded he explain himself. "Why, sir, Sir Bellamy. He attempted to lock his wife in a bedchamber after I wouldn't shackle her. He's accused her of attempted murder." I asked, "On what evidence?" These were his words. "After you left Oakvale about an hour ago, a messenger arrived for me from the chemist. The fool blurted out this message in Sir Bellamy's presence. It seems the bottle I had asked Dr. Withern to examine contained not only Bellamy's sarsaparilla, but a small percentage of laudanum, which has never been prescribed for him. He believes that Annie added the drug to his tonic. I told him I could not imprison her solely because of that discovery, and he was not keen to hear that. I've asked the butler and his wife to call on me should things sour further, and I figured you should know." The inspector seemed at wit's end, and it was clear to me that he believes Lady Bellamy to be blameless in this affair. For my part, I will visit Oakvale again this evening to ensure all is well, but only after sending this letter by special messenger, for I remain baffled by the pieces of this puzzle. Please help me set things right for the Bellamys, Holmes. P.S. On the reverse of this page, you will find my recreation of the drawings and writings I found leaving Oakvale. Well, okay, this 100% seals one aspect of this. These are clearly instructions for giving the bird. Whistle, fly, 2 claps, hop, whistle, fetch, clap, caw. Like, these are notes for training a bird, like to tell the bird what to do. They also look like kids' drawings, though. Does this make us suspect the page boy? So I think now we've got a picture is forming here. They all came to him asking for a raise. Did they all plot this together? Because going back a little bit, yeah, pirate with the bird, octopus. I'll have to see. Maybe this part about berries. What is 2 berries? What does that mean, berries? I think this you're telling how to, yeah, but I'm not sure what berries is. Okay, so there's a couple interesting things here. Okay, so they're all asking for raises. Jane, Flora, Eddie, and even Teddy the page boy. And he says, nope. And they say, okay. Now, look at this nonsense excuse she gives us that seems insanity. She says she confesses to being the one with the croquet ball. She shows it to us. But she says that she went out drinking. They went to a clearing behind the chapel, so they're not too far away from the chapel. She says, look how far I can hit it. She whacks it with all her might. But it's somehow far enough away that she doesn't see it break the window, and yet she's able to hit this wood ball that far. That makes no sense. But also, doesn't seem consistent with the pock marks and the broken window. Like, you couldn't do both, right? You couldn't break the window and do the pock marks, and we saw several pock marks. So this seems like it would be impossible for her to hit it that far. It would be fairly hard for anyone to hit a ball 18 feet into the air. But the two things can't both be true. You can't be able to hit it so far that you can't see where it lands, can't see that it broke the window. So that seems completely implausible. But then this is weird then. This is particularly weird, this part here. So she comes home and she says that the page boy, has found it. He told me he wouldn't say a word if I swore not to tell anyone he'd been out late. So, I mean, first of all, she's I don't know why Watson didn't follow up and check that alibi, but doesn't this mean the page boy would have to be in on it? Because otherwise she'd be dooming herself by making this up. This has to be made up. So that means the boy has to be in on it, which now makes sense when we see the drawings, that maybe this clever page boy has been the one training the bird. It is a little weird that he's found the feather, but oh, look, have you noticed something? Look at this. It's a bird carrying the reliquary in his mouth. Look at this. Look, that's a bird carrying something that looks very much like the reliquary. I'm assuming this is the page boy, but I guess one of the maids could be drawing these figures as well. Looks like he's planning to sail away. And look, there's the bird with the thing in its mouth again. And why would also, the other thing is, Jarvis sees her sneaking in the rain with the croquet ball, smiling, happy. Why would she be happy if she came back and heard this? So, but the big news here seems to be that the boy must be involved in this. And why are we... he's been out late at night. Why is he afraid to admit he's been out late at night? So, at the chat, the window is obviously broken, so they need to explain it somehow. It's obviously a lie. Also said they left out the croquet set in the rain, but that too was a lie. It's true. We've caught her in a second lie, because originally she said, that was something I wanted to point out before. Originally she said, oh, the croquet was left out a previous day. Then she gives away that was a lie here. She says, we were out in the lawn playing games all day on this previous day, on the 1st. Thank heavens Mrs. Jenkins reminded us to stow away the croquet mallets before we left for the village. Isn't that right, Flora? Flora laughed sheepishly. So I think maybe Jane isn't involved, but just Flora is. Flora is the one with the croquet ball. And here Jane is saying, hey, remember when we put everything away? Now Flora's like, oh, Now she realizes her prior excuse about the stuff being left out and carried in on the night of the 3rd doesn't work anymore, which is partly why she's come up with this other story. So I think the reason she's confessing is because she knows that Jane has revealed her previous statement about the stuff being left out in the rain as a lie. On the other hand, one thing that troubles me is that it's not just Teddy that she's used as an alibi. She's also I think okay. Okay, so here's what I was about to say. I was about to say she's described this story with the croquet ball, and she's pulled 2 other people into her alibi. One is the page boy Teddy, but she's also pulled in Jarvis, right? She's said that Jarvis is part of her alibi because Jarvis and her were out in the clearing, and she said, let me see how far I can hit this croquet ball, and I brought him liquor and stuff. So I was going to say at first, that must mean Jarvis is involved because she's using Jarvis as her alibi. But an alternative reading is that her job was to go distract Jarvis. So she's like, Jarvis, come with me. We'll go get drunk. We'll hang out in the forest. Don't you want to spend time with me? And he's a very unpleasant man, and she's a young maid. So it is odd that she would want to spend time. So I think maybe this is not so much evidence that Jarvis is in on it to provide a fake alibi, but that she's lured him away from the chapel while Teddy breaks the window and does the bird. Yeah. And so it's Flora and Teddy that are working together. I don't think it's the other people. I think it's just Flora and Teddy. All right, well, that's pretty funny. And then regarding the poison in his in Lord Bellamy's sarsaparilla, I think it's just going to turn out to be to help him sleep. Don't you think? Let me see what the chat thinks here. His spelling isn't very good. Bury and fetch. Only 2, it's enough. Perry says, I still think Sir Bellamy or his wife is behind this. I don't agree. If Flora is guilty with Teddy, why would she come up with the story of Teddy returning the ball? Makes no sense. Why doesn't it make sense? She's using him as to help her alibi. They're both in the conspiracy, so they both back each other up and make their alibis much more believable. If Watson pulled in Teddy, he would say, yep, that's what happened. The croquet ball came flying from across the field, broke the window by accident, and I gave it to her, and it had nothing to do with the robbery. So they've alibied each other. Okay, and Macon confirms laudanum isn't a poison. It's probably just a sleeping pill. And I think Anna was trying to get at something that I was confused about. I was like, okay, what is the berries? Is that a place? I think it's it's noting it's his notes about how many berries to give the bird as a reward. Like give him 2 berries, and for these tasks, and give him 1 berry for this task. And then the chat is saying laudanum is opium. Rob says she could have just made up a story without putting Teddy on the scene of the crime. Yeah, but maybe she wouldn't be believed. I think, it's a good plan to have a fellow person to alibi you. In fact, it's very hard to defeat that. When you have 2 people alibying each other, it's hard to accuse them both of doing it. All right. I think we've solved it here. I think we have absolutely solved it. Now, there's one thing we haven't solved. What we haven't solved is an initial question. So let's go to our questions here. I mean, we'll have another session where we'll get to talk about this, so we don't need to spend too much time. But how did it make its departure? That's the bird. Who absconded with it? Where is it now? Is his life in danger? No, we think. Okay, so that's that. The maids reacted suspiciously when he was talking about sleeping and dreaming, so they might have known about the laudanum. Yes, they might have. Or I suppose Flora may have put it in, but only the wife knows where it is. So I suspect it's like an open secret that they feed him opium to help him sleep. But Professor B was saying the other thing. We don't know where the relic is. Okay, so I have a theory. Although it's not strong. So if we believe, we initially thought, okay, you're going to find it in Flora's chamber. She's the thief. Now we know that Flora and Teddy are involved, and Teddy is like the mastermind. And he fancies himself a detective and clever. So you could get, before we could have guessed it was in Flora's chambers, now you might have equally likely to say, well, it's in Flora's chambers or it's in Teddy's chambers. Anna says if the bird is Teddy's, then he has the relic. He does have a house on the property, on the site. So that is a very reasonable guess. However, something jumped out at me here. He says, when I was first called to Oakvale, I expected him to demand a search of his servants and perhaps their quarters. If the culprits feared the same thing, I wonder if that might make them think we've got to plant this far away from us until the coast is clear. This brings me back to that candelabra. Like, could they be trying to be clever and not keep it in their quarters? So that's what I would guess. If I had to guess, if you put me on the spot and we had to answer this question, where is it now? I think I might say that it's unlikely to be in the actual quarters of Teddy or Flora. And it's more likely to be hidden outside of their quarters. A logical place would be in the ground somewhere. But I wonder if Teddy doesn't fancy himself enough of a clever detective that he's hiding it in plain sight in the candelabra. But maybe I'm being too clever. Maybe there's it's a candle, so that's too clever. But I would say it's not going to be in their houses because maybe they would expect to be searched. Okay, let's see. Anna says, yes, it's supposed to be Barry. Maids reacted suspicious when he was talking about the sleeping heavily. Okay, if the bird is Teddy's, then he has the relic. DJ Moneycut says, so did the bird retrieve the ball as well? The suspenders aren't long enough if the window is 18 feet high. Maybe they hid it inside the ball. Okay. So I had an answer to that, DJ. I had an answer to the suspenders aren't long enough if the window is 18 feet high. If you'll remember, my answer to that is the tree. So we're told by one of the investigators, I don't remember where, that he sees there's a tree near the chapel. And he wonders, could someone have climbed up the tree and leaped across to the roof? But he thinks, no, it's too precarious. But you could have climbed up there with the ball on suspender braces and thrown it the 5 feet between the tree and the window. And now we think it's Teddy that's throwing it, by the way. Let's see if we can find, where is the tree? And we might want to look again at the boys' statements. Where is our statement of the tree? Let's see. The only finding is a broken window. Window is some 15 feet, 17 foot, too small, no muddy tracks, it had rained, no hidden passageway. Where is our tree statement? Anyone remember where the tree is? He talks about it. He talks about the idea that someone could climb it and jump in. Dust, tapestry, benches, windows are so high. They all march over. They open it up. They don't find anything in it. Here's their alibis. Fortune teller. Maybe it was in this one. Door's the only entrance. 6 leaded windows. 7 feet high on the windows. Here we go. Oh, wait, let's see. Where is the tree? Here we go. All right, let's read this. I took another quick walk around the chapel where I encountered the butler again, later the page boy. The ground around the chapel had been badly churned by Sir Bellamy and his clumsy footmen, but I found no evidence that someone attempted an entry by means of a ladder or otherwise. I thought perhaps a thief might have climbed the oak standing next to the building to access the roof, but a study of its branches assures me that it would be far too risky of a leap. It'd be nice to know what side of the building the oak is to make sure it's near the window, but that's the thing. It's too rickety, too risky of a leap, but for a small boy to climb up the tree wouldn't be so hard. I told you to keep out of there, boy. Look at that. So he's been in there before, the boy. And look who he's trying to blame. He's trying to insinuate magpies are signs of spirits nearby. Jane told me so. He's trying to like put some blame on Jane. All right. This relic is so small it could practically be anywhere, but I guess there is a hint about its whereabouts. It would have to be the size of a large cigar tube. That's not tiny. A bird can carry that, please, easily. Okay, we're going to stop here. A fun session. Next week, we will read the solution. We can talk a little bit before we read it, our final theories. So you have a week to formulate any final theories. The most important thing for you to try to figure out, to cogitate on, is it just Flora and Teddy? Are other people involved? And where is the reliquary? We'll find out next week.